The snow was falling hard on Maple Street that February morning when Helen Patterson first saw something that made her heart sink. From her kitchen window, the 67-year-old woman watched three small children digging through her neighbor's garbage cans. The oldest child, a thin girl with dirty blonde hair, was holding a baby, while a younger boy searched desperately through the trash. Helen had lived on Maple Street for 40 years. She had seen families come and go, good times and bad times. But nothing like this. The children were not wearing coats. The baby was crying. The little boy's hands were red from the cold as he pulled out empty food containers and looked inside them. Helen grabbed her phone and called 911. The Williams family had moved into the old duplex at 1247 Maple Street 6 months earlier. Robert Williams was 34 years old and worked sometimes as a mechanic at a garage downtown. His wife Jessica was 29. They had 3 children together. Emma was 8 years old and in 2nd grade. Tyler was 6 and should have been in 1st grade but rarely went to school. Baby Sophia was 18 months old. When the Williams family first arrived in the neighborhood, Helen had tried to be friendly. She had baked cookies and knocked on their door to welcome them. Jessica had answered the door but would not let Helen inside. She took the cookies quickly and closed the door without saying much. Helen could hear children crying inside the house. Over the next few months, Helen began to notice strange things. The children were outside at all hours of the day and night. Sometimes she would see Emma walking Tyler to school, but more often they were just wandering around the neighborhood. The baby was always with Emma, who carried her everywhere like a little mother. Helen was not the only neighbor who was worried. Mrs. Dorothy Johnson lived next door to the Williams family. She could hear shouting and crying through the thin walls, almost every night. Sometimes the crying would go on for hours. Dorothy had also called the police twice before that February morning, but each time the officers came, Robert or Jessica would answer the door and say everything was fine. The Williams house looked different from the other houses on the street. The grass was not cut. There were broken toys in the front yard. The windows were often covered with sheets instead of curtains. Sometimes there was no light on in the house at night, even when the children were home. Detective Maria Rodriguez got the call about the children in the garbage at 9:30 in the morning. She had been working with the Detroit police for 12 years and had seen many sad cases involving children. But something about this call worried her more than usual. When Detective Rodriguez arrived at Maple Street, she found Officer James Mitchell already there. He was talking to Helen Patterson on her front porch. Helen was crying and pointing at the Williams house. "Those poor babies," Helen kept saying. "I've been watching them for months. They're always hungry. They're always cold. Where are their parents?" Detective Rodriguez walked over to 1247 Maple Street and knocked on the door. She could hear movement inside, but no one answered. She knocked again, louder this time. "Detroit Police. We need to talk to someone about a welfare check." After a few minutes, the door opened. Jessica Williams stood there in a dirty bathrobe. Her hair was messy and she looked like she had just woken up, even though it was almost 10 in the morning. "What do you want?" Jessica asked. "Ma'am, we got a report about your children being outside without proper clothing looking for food. We need to make sure everyone is okay." Jessica's face got red. "My kids are fine. Mind your own business." But Detective Rodriguez could see past Jessica into the house. The living room was dark and messy. There were empty bottles on the floor. She could smell something bad coming from inside. "Ma'am, I need to see the children to make sure they're safe. It's just a quick check." Jessica tried to close the door, but Detective Rodriguez put her hand on it. "Ma'am, you need to cooperate with us. Where are your children right now?" After a moment, Jessica stepped back and let the detective inside. The smell hit Detective Rodriguez right away. It smelled like dirty diapers and spoiled food and something else she could not identify. The house was cold. There was no heat on. "Kids, come here," Jessica called out. Emma came out first, carrying baby Sophia. Tyler was behind her, holding onto his sister's shirt. Detective Rodriguez had to hold back her shock at what she saw. Emma was too thin. Her clothes were too big and too dirty. Baby Sophia looked much smaller than an 18-month-old should look. Tyler had dark circles under his eyes and seemed scared to look at the adults. "Hi there," Detective Rodriguez said softly to Emma. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," the little girl whispered. She held the baby tighter. "Are you okay, Emma? Are you hungry?" Emma looked at her mother before answering. "We had cereal this morning." But Detective Rodriguez could see there was no cereal in the kitchen. There was no food anywhere that she could see. The refrigerator was unplugged. "Where's your daddy?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "He's at work," Jessica said quickly. But Emma looked confused. She started to say something, but Jessica gave her a look that made her stop talking. Detective Rodriguez spent 20 more minutes in the house. She saw empty cabinets in the kitchen. She saw mattresses on the floor with no sheets. She saw a crib for the baby that had no blankets or toys. When she asked Jessica about the children's last meal, Jessica got angry and started yelling. She said the police had no right to be in her house. She said her children were fed and clothed and taken care of, but Emma's eyes told a different story. The little girl looked at Detective Rodriguez like she wanted to say something important, but was too afraid. Before leaving, Detective Rodriguez gave Emma her card. "If you ever need help, you call this number, okay?" Emma nodded and hid the card in her pocket. Detective Rodriguez left the Williams house that day knowing she would be back. She filed a report with Child Protective Services immediately. She also made a note in her case file. High-risk situation. Children appear malnourished and neglected. Parents uncooperative. Follow-up required within 48 hours. What Detective Rodriguez did not know that day was that Robert Williams had not been at work. He was at Murphy's bar on Jefferson Street, where he had been drinking since the night before. He would not come home for 2 more days. What she also did not know was that Emma, Tyler, and baby Sophia had not eaten anything in 36 hours. The children Jessica claimed had eaten cereal that morning were surviving on water from the bathroom sink. But Detective Rodriguez did know one thing for certain as she drove away from Maple Street that morning. She would not let these children disappear into the system. She would keep watching. She would keep checking. She had no idea that in just 3 weeks, she would be standing in that same house again. But this time it would be too late to save them all. Amanda Thompson had been a social worker for 8 years, but she had never seen a case file grow as fast as the Williams family file. In just 2 weeks after Detective Rodriguez's first visit, 5 more reports came in. Teachers from Emma's school called twice. The mailman called once. Even a grocery store clerk called to report seeing the children begging for food outside the store. Amanda drove to Maple Street on a cold Tuesday morning in March. She had called the Williams house 3 times to set up an appointment. But no one answered the phone. Sometimes in this job she had to make surprise visits. The Williams house looked worse than it did in the police photos. There were more broken toys in the yard. The front door was hanging crooked on its hinges. Amanda could hear a baby crying inside before she even knocked. When Jessica Williams opened the door, Amanda could tell right away that something was very wrong. Jessica's eyes were red and glassy. She moved slowly, like she was confused or sick. She wore the same dirty bathrobe that Detective Rodriguez had described in her report. "Mrs. Williams, I'm Amanda Thompson from Child Protective Services. We need to talk about your children." Jessica tried to close the door, but Amanda had learned to be quick in situations like this. She put her foot in the doorway. "Ma'am, I have the legal right to check on your children. You can let me in now or I can come back with the police and a court order." Jessica stepped back and let Amanda inside. The smell was even worse than Detective Rodriguez had described. Amanda had to breathe through her mouth to keep from getting sick. The living room was dark, even though it was the middle of the day. All the curtains were closed. There were empty beer bottles everywhere. Pizza boxes were stacked on the floor, but they were all empty. Amanda saw drug pipes on the coffee table, not even hidden. "Where are your children, Mrs. Williams?" Jessica pointed toward the back of the house. "Emma's taking care of them. She's a good girl. She helps me a lot." Amanda walked toward the back bedroom, and what she found there would stay in her mind forever. Emma was sitting on a mattress on the floor, holding baby Sophia. Tyler was curled up next to them, sleeping. All 3 children were too thin. Their clothes were dirty and too big for their small bodies. Emma looked up when Amanda came into the room. The 8-year-old girl had dark circles under her eyes that made her look much older than her age. "Hi," Emma whispered. "Are you here to help us?" Amanda knelt down next to the mattress. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm here to help. What's your name?" "Emma. This is Tyler and this is Sophia. Sophia is sick. She won't stop crying, and I don't know what to do." Amanda looked at baby Sophia. The little girl was much too small for 18 months old. Her skin looked gray and her breathing was too fast. When Amanda touched her forehead, the baby felt very warm. "Emma, when did you last eat?" Emma looked toward the door to make sure her mother was not listening. "Yesterday I found some crackers in the kitchen, but there's nothing left now." "What about Tyler and Sophia?" "I gave Tyler half of my crackers. Sophia won't eat anything. I tried to give her water, but she just cries." Amanda felt her heart breaking. This 8-year-old child was trying to take care of 2 younger children with no food and no help from her parents. "Emma, where is your daddy?" "He went away 3 days ago. Mommy said he went to work, but he didn't come home. Sometimes he goes away for a long time." Amanda spent the next hour talking to Emma while Tyler slept, and baby Sophia cried quietly in Emma's arms. The story Emma told was worse than anything Amanda had imagined. Emma said her parents left them alone most of the time. Sometimes they would be gone for 2 or 3 days. Emma had learned to take care of Tyler and Sophia by herself. She would look for food in the kitchen, but there was usually nothing there. Sometimes she would take the baby and Tyler to neighbors' houses to ask for food, but most people told them to go home. Emma had also learned to hide when her parents came home drunk or high. She said her daddy got angry when the baby cried. Mommy slept most of the time and got mad when the children woke her up. "I tried to cook once," Emma told Amanda, "but the stove doesn't work, and Mommy locked all the cabinets so we can't get food." Amanda looked around the bedroom. There were no toys, no books, no clothes in the closet. The only furniture was the mattress on the floor and a broken chair. When Amanda went back to the living room, she found Jessica passed out on the couch. There were fresh needle marks on her arms. Amanda tried to wake her up to ask about getting medical help for the baby, but Jessica would not wake up. Amanda called an ambulance right away. Baby Sophia needed to go to the hospital immediately. She also called Detective Rodriguez to come back to the house. While they waited for help to arrive, Amanda sat with the children. Emma was very smart and very brave, but she was also very scared. She kept asking if she was in trouble for not taking better care of Tyler and Sophia. "You are not in trouble, Emma," Amanda told her. "You are the bravest little girl I have ever met. You have been taking care of your brother and sister better than most grown-ups could do." When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics were shocked by baby Sophia's condition. Tom Bradley, who had been a paramedic for 15 years, said later that he had never seen a child so malnourished who was still alive. "This baby weighs maybe 12 pounds, Tom told Amanda. "A healthy 18-month-old should weigh at least 20 pounds. "How long has she been like this?" Emma heard the question and answered before Amanda could speak. "Sophia has been getting smaller for a long time. I tried to feed her, but she won't eat anything. I don't think she knows how to eat anymore." Dr. Patricia Martinez was waiting at Children's Hospital when the ambulance arrived. She had been warned that this was a severe malnutrition case, but she was not prepared for what she saw. Baby Sophia looked more like a 6-month-old than an 18-month-old. Her arms and legs were like sticks. Her head looked too big for her tiny body. She was barely conscious and her breathing was very shallow. Emma and Tyler were also examined at the hospital. Both children were severely underweight. Emma weighed only 32 pounds, which was normal for a 5-year-old, not an 8-year-old. Tyler weighed 28 pounds and had developed asthma from living in the cold, dirty house. But the worst part was not the physical problems. Both Emma and Tyler were terrified of adults. They held on to each other and would not let go. When nurses tried to separate them for examinations, both children started crying and begging to stay together. Dr. Martinez found old bruises on both children's bodies. Emma had burn marks on her hands from trying to use matches to heat food. Tyler had a scar on his forehead that looked like it came from being hit with something hard. "These children have been living in survival mode for months, maybe years," Dr. Martinez told Amanda. Emma has been their primary caregiver. Without her, Tyler and the baby would already be dead. That night, Amanda sat in her car outside the hospital and cried. In 8 years of social work, she had seen many bad situations, but she had never seen children who had suffered so much and still tried so hard to take care of each other. She also knew that this case was far from over. Robert Williams still had not been found. Jessica Williams was in jail, but she would probably be released soon. And most importantly, baby Sophia was fighting for her life in the intensive care unit. Amanda made a promise to herself that night. She would not let these children fall through the cracks of the system. She would fight for them every day until they were safe. She had no way of knowing that her fight was just beginning. David Johnson had been supervising child welfare cases for 12 years, but he had never felt as helpless as he did sitting in his office that March morning. The Williams case file was now 3 inches thick, and it had only been open for 6 weeks. Every day brought new reports, new concerns, and new evidence that these children were in serious danger. But David's hands were tied by laws, procedures, and a system that moved too slowly to save children who needed help right now. The problem started with Jessica Williams herself. Even though Amanda Thompson had found the children in terrible condition, Jessica had rights as their mother. The law said that families should be kept together whenever possible. Jessica had to be given chances to fix the problems before her. Children could be taken away permanently. After Jessica was released from jail on drug charges, she was required to attend parenting classes and drug treatment. She was also supposed to have supervised visits with her children, who were staying temporarily with Robert's mother, Margaret Williams. But Jessica missed most of her appointments. When she did show up for visits with the children, she seemed more interested in arguing with the social workers than spending time with Emma, Tyler, and baby Sophia. Margaret Williams was 58 years old and worked 2 jobs to pay her rent. She wanted to help her grandchildren, but taking care of 3 traumatized children was more than she could handle alone. Emma still would not sleep through the night. She would wake up crying, thinking she had to take care of the baby. Tyler had nightmares and would not eat unless Emma told him it was okay. Baby Sophia was still in the hospital. She had been there for 3 weeks, and doctors were not sure if she would ever be completely healthy. The malnutrition had damaged her brain, development. She was learning to eat solid food again, but it was a slow process. Dr. Patricia Martinez visited Sophia every day. She had become attached to the tiny girl who smiled whenever someone picked her up. Dr. Martinez had seen many abused children in her career, but something about Sophia's case made her more determined than usual to see justice done. This baby should be walking and talking by now, Dr. Martinez told Amanda Thompson during one of their meetings. Instead, she's learning how to eat baby food again. The damage that has been done to her may last forever. Meanwhile, Robert Williams was still missing. Detective Rodriguez had put out a warrant for his arrest, but Robert seemed to have disappeared completely. His friends said they had not seen him. His boss at the auto repair shop said he had not come to work in over a month. The truth was that Robert was hiding in an abandoned house on the west side of Detroit. He was living with other drug addicts and spending his days getting high and his nights trying to forget about his children. Sometimes he would think about Emma and how she used to run to hug him when he came home from work. But those thoughts made him feel guilty, so he would take more drugs to make the thoughts go away. Robert knew the police were looking for him. He knew his children were not living with Jessica anymore, but he was too afraid and too ashamed to face what he had done to his family. Back at Child Protective Services, David Johnson was fighting with the court system to get permission to terminate Jessica's parental rights. But the process was slow and complicated. Jessica had hired a lawyer who argued that she deserved more time to get clean and learn to be a better parent. Judge Harold Mitchell was handling the Williams case, and he was frustrated too. He had been a family court judge for 25 years, and he believed in giving parents second chances. But he also knew that some parents were too dangerous to deserve those chances. The problem was proving it. Jessica had completed some of her drug treatment classes. She had visited the children a few times. Her lawyer argued that she was making progress and should be allowed to have her children back. But Amanda Thompson knew better. During the supervised visits, Jessica seemed to have no idea how to interact with her own children. She would sit in the visitation room and stare at her phone while Emma tried to get her attention. When baby Sophia cried, Jessica would look annoyed and ask the social worker to make her stop. "She doesn't act like a mother," Amanda wrote in her report. "She acts like a stranger who is forced to spend time with children she doesn't know." Emma was the one who suffered the most during these visits. The 8-year-old girl still felt responsible for taking care of everyone. She would try to make her mother happy by being very quiet and well-behaved. She would also try to take care of Tyler and Sophia during the visits, just like she had done at home. After each visit, Emma would cry for hours. Margaret Williams did not know how to help her granddaughter deal with such complicated emotions. Emma loved her mother, but she was also afraid of her. She wanted to go home, but she also knew that home was not safe. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in late March. Margaret Williams had to work late at her second job, so she asked her neighbor, Mrs. Carol Davis, to watch the children for a few hours. Mrs. Davis was making dinner when Emma suddenly collapsed in the kitchen. The little girl had been looking pale and weak for several days, but Margaret thought it was just stress from everything that had happened. Mrs. Davis called 911 and Emma was rushed to the same hospital where baby Sophia was still recovering. Dr. Martinez examined Emma and found that she was severely dehydrated and malnourished. Her body had been surviving on stress hormones for so long that it was finally giving up. "This child has been in survival mode for months," Dr. Martinez told Margaret Williams. "Her body has been working so hard to keep her alive and keep her functioning as a caregiver that it's exhausted. She needs immediate medical attention and a lot of rest." But even in the hospital, Emma could not rest. She kept asking about Tyler and Sophia. She kept trying to get out of bed to check on them. The nurses had to explain to her over and over that her brother and sister were safe and that other adults were taking care of them. Lisa Anderson, Emma's second-grade teacher, came to visit her in the hospital. Lisa had been teaching for 15 years, and she had never had a student who worried her as much as Emma did. "Emma is one of the smartest children I've ever taught," Lisa told Dr. Martinez. "But she can't concentrate on schoolwork because she's always worried about her family. She falls asleep in class because she doesn't sleep at night. Sometimes I find her saving food from lunch to take home, even though I know she's living with her grandmother now." Lisa also told Dr. Martinez about the day that changed everything for Emma at school. It was a Tuesday morning in February, and Emma had come to class looking worse than usual. During math time, Emma suddenly put her head down on her desk and would not lift it up. When Lisa went to check on her, she found that Emma had fainted. The school nurse said Emma's blood sugar was dangerously low. When they asked her when she had last eaten, Emma said she could not remember. That was the day Lisa called Child Protective Services for the second time. It was also the day that Emma finally told an adult the whole truth about what was happening at home. "My mommy and daddy don't come home most of the time," Emma had whispered to Lisa. "I try to feed Tyler and Sophia, but there's no food. I don't know what to do. Sophia cries all the time and I can't make her stop." Now, lying in a hospital bed, Emma was finally getting the help she needed. But Dr. Martinez worried that it might be too late to undo all the damage that had been done to her young mind and body. The system that was supposed to protect Emma, Tyler, and Sophia had failed them in many ways. Too many reports had been ignored. Too many warning signs had been missed. Too many adults had assumed that someone else would take care of the problem. But the biggest failure was still to come. Because while Emma was in the hospital and while social workers were fighting in court, and while everyone was focused on following procedures, Robert Williams was making a decision that would destroy what was left of his family forever. He was coming home. It was 11:30 at night on March 28th when Robert Williams stumbled back to the house on Maple Street. He had been gone for almost 6 weeks, living in abandoned buildings and shooting heroin with other addicts. But the drugs were not working anymore. To stop the guilt and shame that ate at him every day, Robert was not thinking clearly when he decided to go home. The house had been empty since the children were taken away, and Jessica was arrested again for missing her court-ordered drug tests. Robert had forgotten that he was not supposed to be there. He had forgotten that there was a warrant out for his arrest. He only remembered that he missed his children and wanted to see them again. But when Robert got to the house, he found Jessica there instead. She had broken into the house earlier that day after being released from jail. Jessica was high on methamphetamine and had been awake for 3 days straight. She was angry about losing her children and angry about the social workers and angry about everything that had happened to her life. The neighbors heard them fighting immediately. Helen Patterson, who had made the first call about the children, heard shouting and glass breaking. She thought about calling the police, but she was tired of getting involved in the Williams family problems. She turned up her television and tried to ignore the noise. What Helen did not know was that Robert and Jessica were planning something terrible. In their drug-addled minds, they had decided that if they could not have their children back, then they would take them away from everyone else too. Jessica still had Margaret Williams's phone number from the supervised visits. At 2:30 in the morning, she called Margaret and told her that there was an emergency with baby Sophia at the hospital. She said the doctors needed to see Emma and Tyler right away. Margaret Williams was half asleep when she got the call, but she was worried about baby Sophia, who was still recovering from the malnutrition. Without thinking clearly, Margaret woke up Emma and Tyler and drove them to meet Jessica at the hospital. But Jessica was not at the hospital. She was waiting in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner near Margaret's house. When Margaret arrived with the children, Jessica was not alone. Robert was with her, and they both looked wild and dangerous. "Give me my kids," Jessica screamed at Margaret. "They're my kids, and you can't keep them from me." Margaret realized immediately that she had made a terrible mistake. Jessica and Robert were obviously high on drugs, and they were acting crazy. Margaret tried to get back in her car with Emma and Tyler, but Robert blocked her way. "You're not taking them anywhere," Robert said. His voice was shaking and his hands were shaking too. "We're their parents. They belong with us." Emma was terrified. She had not seen her father in weeks, and he looked different now. He was much thinner, and his eyes were red and scary. She held Tyler's hand tightly and tried to stay close to her grandmother. Margaret tried to reason with them. "Robert, Jessica, please. The children are safe with me. They're getting better. Emma is in school, and Tyler is learning to trust people. Again. Don't do this to them." But Robert and Jessica were not listening to reason. Robert grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her away from Margaret. Jessica picked up Tyler, who started crying and reaching for his grandmother. "Please don't take them," Margaret begged. "Please, they've been through enough." But it was too late. Robert and Jessica forced the children into their old car and drove away, leaving Margaret standing alone in the parking lot. Margaret immediately called 911, but the Williams family had a 30-minute head start. Detective Rodriguez got the call at 3:15 in the morning. She had been dreading this moment since the first day she met the Williams family. She knew that Robert and Jessica were dangerous when they were using drugs. She also knew that they had nothing left to lose now. Every police officer in Detroit was looking for the Williams family car, but Robert knew the city well. He drove to an abandoned warehouse on the east side where he had been hiding for weeks. The building was scheduled to be torn down, so no one ever came there except other drug addicts and homeless people. Inside the warehouse, Emma and Tyler huddled, together on a dirty mattress while their parents argued about what to do next. Emma was trying to be brave for Tyler, but she was more scared than she had ever been in her life. She kept thinking about baby Sophia in the hospital and wondering if she would ever see her little sister again. Robert and Jessica were getting more paranoid and more violent as the drugs wore off. They accused each other of ruining their family. They accused the social workers and the police and the judges of stealing their children, but they never admitted that they had caused all the problems themselves. As the sun came up on March 29th, Emma made a decision that showed how brave and smart she was. While her parents were arguing in another part of the warehouse, Emma found an old cell phone that someone had left behind. The phone had just enough battery left to make one call. Emma remembered the number that Detective Rodriguez had given her months ago. She dialed the number and whispered into the phone. "Detective Rodriguez? This is Emma Williams. My mommy and Daddy took me and Tyler to a scary place. We're in a big building with broken windows. I can see a sign that says Jefferson Street. Please come find us. I'm scared." Detective Rodriguez was already in her car when she got Emma's call. She had been searching for the Williams family all night. Emma's description of the building helped her narrow down the search area. "Emma, you are such a brave girl," Detective Rodriguez said. "I'm coming to find you right now. Can you and Tyler hide somewhere safe until I get there?" "I think so," Emma whispered. "But hurry, please. My daddy has a gun and my mommy is acting really crazy." Detective Rodriguez called for backup and raced toward the Jefferson Street area. She found the abandoned warehouse at 6:45 in the morning. The Williams family car was parked outside, and she could hear shouting coming from inside the building. What happened next would haunt Detective Rodriguez for the rest of her career. As she and 3 other officers approached the warehouse, they heard Emma screaming. Then they heard a gunshot. The officers rushed into the building and found a scene that was like something from a nightmare. Robert Williams was holding a gun and yelling that nobody was going to take his children away from him again. Jessica was trying to grab Tyler, who was crying hysterically. Emma was on the ground, bleeding from a wound on her shoulder. "Drop the gun, Robert," Detective Rodriguez shouted. "Let the children go. Nobody has to get hurt here." But Robert was too far gone to listen to reason. The drugs and the guilt and the anger had driven him completely insane. He pointed the gun at Detective Rodriguez and threatened to kill anyone who tried to take his children. The standoff lasted for 2 hours. A police negotiator tried to talk Robert into surrendering, but Robert kept getting more agitated and more dangerous. Emma's shoulder was bleeding badly, but the officers could not get close enough to help her without risking everyone's lives. Finally, Robert made the decision that ended everything. At 8:52 in the morning, he turned the gun on himself and pulled the trigger. Jessica screamed and collapsed. Emma and Tyler were traumatized but alive. Emma was rushed to the hospital for surgery on her shoulder wound. Tyler was physically unhurt, but emotionally destroyed by what he had witnessed. Jessica was arrested and charged with kidnapping and child endangerment. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez worked to save Emma's shoulder, while a team of psychologists began working to save her mind. The 8-year-old girl had been through more trauma than most adults experience in a lifetime. "Emma is one of the strongest children I have ever met," Dr. Martinez told Detective Rodriguez. "But even the strongest children have limits. What happened today may change her forever." Detective Rodriguez sat in the hospital waiting room and cried for the second time since she had become a police officer. She had been trying to save the Williams children for 2 months, and she felt like she had failed them, but she had not failed them. Emma and Tyler were alive because of her work, and the work of Amanda Thompson and Dr. Martinez and all the other people who had refused to give up on them. The tragedy was not that the system had failed completely. The tragedy was that it had failed just enough to let Robert Williams destroy what was left of his family. Baby Sophia was still in the hospital, slowly getting better. Emma and Tyler were alive and would recover from their physical injuries, but the emotional scars from that morning in the warehouse would stay with them forever. The worst part was that none of it had to happen. If Robert and Jessica had gotten help for their drug problems earlier, if the court system had moved faster, if someone had recognized the signs of danger sooner, 3 children might have grown up happy and healthy instead of traumatized and afraid. But sometimes in real life, the good guys don't win completely. Sometimes they can only save what's left and hope it's enough. The courtroom was packed on the morning of September 15th when Jessica Williams was brought in for her trial. She looked very different from the woman who had answered the door to Detective Rodriguez 6 months earlier. Jessica had lost weight in jail and her hair was clean and pulled back neatly, but her eyes still had the same empty look that had worried social workers from the beginning. Prosecutor Angela Martinez had been preparing for this trial since the day Robert Williams killed himself in the warehouse. Angela had prosecuted many child abuse cases in her 15 years as a district attorney, but the Williams case was different. The evidence of what these parents had done to their children was so overwhelming and so shocking that Angela sometimes had to take breaks while reading the case files. Jessica was charged with 3 counts of child abuse, 2 counts of child endangerment, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit kidnapping. If convicted on all charges, she could spend the rest of her life in prison. Jessica's lawyer was a public defender named Michael Torres. Michael had drawn the short straw when the case was assigned, and he knew that defending Jessica Williams was going to be almost impossible. The evidence against her was clear and strong. The children's medical records spoke for themselves. The photos of the house on Maple Street showed conditions that no child should ever have to live in. But Michael's job was not to prove that Jessica was a good mother. His job was to argue that she deserved a chance at rehabilitation instead of life in prison. Michael planned to argue that Jessica was a victim herself, a woman whose drug addiction had made her unable to care for her children properly. The first witness was Detective Rodriguez. She took the stand wearing her dress uniform and spoke in a clear, strong voice about the first day she met the Williams children. Emma was 8 years old, but she was acting like an adult, Detective Rodriguez told the jury. She was holding the baby and taking care of her 6-year-old brother like she was their mother. When I asked her if she was hungry, she looked at her real mother before answering, like she was afraid to tell the truth. Angela Martinez showed the jury photographs of the Williams house from that first day. The jury members looked shocked and disgusted as they saw the empty refrigerator, the dirty mattresses on the floor, and the drug paraphernalia scattered around the living room. Detective Rodriguez, in your opinion, was this house a safe place for children to live? No, ma'am. I've been a police officer for 12 years and I've never seen children living in worse conditions. These children were starving and neglected, and their parents were too high on drugs to care. The second witness was Amanda Thompson, the social worker. Amanda had been dreading this day for months. She knew she would have to talk about the things she had seen in the Williams house, and she knew it would be difficult. Amanda told the jury about finding Emma trying to take care of Tyler and baby Sophia with no food, no heat, and no help from any adults. She described how thin the children were and how scared they seemed. Emma told me that she had been giving Tyler half of her crackers, Amanda testified. But when I looked in the kitchen, there were no crackers. There was no food at all. This 8-year-old child was trying to feed her siblings with food that didn't exist. Angela Martinez showed the jury medical records from Children's Hospital. Mrs. Thompson, can you tell the jury what the doctors found when Emma, Tyler, and baby Sophia were examined? Amanda took a deep breath before answering. All 3 children were severely malnourished. Baby Sophia weighed only 12 pounds at 18 months old. Emma weighed 32 pounds at 8 years old. Both children had old bruises and injuries that had never been treated by a doctor. The third witness was Dr. Patricia Martinez from Children's Hospital. Dr. Martinez had treated hundreds of abused children, but she had never forgotten baby Sophia Williams. Baby Sophia was the most malnourished child I had ever seen who was still alive, Dr. Martinez told the jury. Her body was eating its own muscle tissue to survive. Her brain development had been severely damaged by months of starvation. When she came to us, she could not sit up, could not eat solid food, and could barely respond to voices or faces. Dr. Martinez also testified about Emma's condition. Emma was suffering from what we call toxic stress. Her body had been producing stress hormones for so long that it was affecting her physical development. She was small for her age, had trouble sleeping, and showed signs of severe anxiety and depression. The most difficult testimony came from Emma herself. Judge Harold Mitchell had decided that Emma was old enough and smart enough to testify about what had happened to her family, but he also made sure that Emma had a counselor with her, and that the lawyers asked their questions in a gentle way. Emma was now 9 years old and living with her grandmother, Margaret. She had grown taller and gained weight, but she still looked younger and smaller than other children her age. When she walked to the witness stand, she was holding her grandmother's hand tightly. Angela Martinez spoke to Emma in a soft, kind voice. Emma, do you remember living in the house on Maple Street with your mommy and daddy? Emma nodded. Yes, ma'am. Can you tell the jury what it was like living there? Emma looked at her grandmother and then at the judge before answering. It was scary. Mommy and Daddy were gone a lot. I had to take care of Tyler and Sophia by myself. Sometimes there was no food and no lights. Sophia cried a lot because she was hungry, but I didn't know how to help her. Emma, did you ever ask your mommy or daddy for food when they were home? Sometimes, but they would get mad at me. Daddy said I was a bad girl for asking for things. Mommy said there was no money for food, But then she would buy things that weren't food. Angela Martinez showed Emma a photograph of the kitchen in the Maple Street house. "Emma, do you see this picture of the kitchen? Can you tell the jury about the cabinets?" Emma's voice got very quiet. "Mommy put locks on all the cabinets so we couldn't get food. She said we were eating too much, but we were hungry all the time." The hardest question came at the end of Emma's testimony. "Emma, how did you feel when you had to take care of Tyler and Sophia?" Emma started crying, but she kept talking. "I felt scared because I didn't know what to do. Tyler would ask me for food and I didn't have any to give him. Sophia would cry and I couldn't make her stop. I wanted my mommy to help me, but she was always sleeping or gone." Michael Torres, Jessica's lawyer, tried to be gentle when he cross-examined Emma, but he still had to ask difficult questions. "Emma, do you remember your mommy ever being sick?" "Yes, sir. Mommy was sick a lot. She would sleep all day and sometimes she would fall down." "Did your mommy ever tell you she loved you?" Emma thought about this question for a long time before answering. Sometimes she would say it, but it didn't feel real. When she said it, she looked like she was thinking about something else. Tyler did not testify at the trial because he was only 7 years old, and the psychologist said it would be too traumatic for him. But his medical records and his drawings from therapy sessions were shown to the jury. Tyler's drawings showed stick figures of children crying and adults who looked angry or absent. The most damaging evidence against Jessica came from her own words. The police had recorded some of her phone calls from jail, and Angela Martinez played these recordings for the jury. In one call to a friend, Jessica complained about losing her children. "It's not fair," Jessica said on the recording. "I never hurt them that bad. Lots of parents leave their kids alone sometimes. Why am I getting in trouble when other people do worse things?" In another call, Jessica blamed everyone except herself for what happened to her family. She blamed the social workers for taking her children away. She blamed the police for harassing her. She blamed Robert for killing himself and leaving her to face the consequences alone. But Jessica never said she was sorry for what she had done to Emma, Tyler, and Sophia. She never admitted that she had failed as a mother. She never took responsibility for the suffering her children had endured. The trial lasted for 2 weeks. Angela Martinez called 12 witnesses, including neighbors who had seen the children begging for food, teachers who had reported the abuse, and medical experts who explained the long-term damage that had been done to the children. Michael Torres tried his best to defend Jessica, but there was very little he could say in her favor. He called 2 witnesses, a drug counselor who testified that addiction was a disease, and Jessica's own mother, who said that Jessica had been abused as a child herself. But none of this changed the basic facts of the case. Jessica Williams had chosen drugs over her children. She had let them starve while she and Robert spent money on heroin and methamphetamine. She had ignored their cries for help and abandoned them when they needed her most. When it came time for closing arguments, Angela Martinez stood up and looked directly at the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about choices. Jessica Williams made choices every day for months. She chose to buy drugs instead of food. She chose to sleep instead of caring for her children. She chose to lock the kitchen cabinets so her starving children could not even look for crackers to eat." Angela Martinez walked over to a table where photographs of the children were displayed. 8-year-old Emma Williams should have been learning to read and playing with friends. Instead, she was trying to keep her baby sister alive with no food and no help from any adult. That is not a choice a child should ever have to make, and it is not a situation a mother should ever create. Michael Torres tried to argue that Jessica deserved mercy because of her own difficult childhood and her struggles with addiction, but his words sounded hollow after 2 weeks of testimony about what the children had suffered. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before reaching their verdict. Jessica Williams was found guilty on all charges. At sentencing, Judge Mitchell listened to victim impact statements from several people who had tried to help the Williams children. Margaret Williams spoke about the nightmares her grandchildren still had and the long process of helping them learn to trust adults again. Amanda Thompson talked about how the Williams case had changed her approach to social work and made her more determined to fight for children who could not fight for themselves. Emma did not make a statement at sentencing, but she did write a letter that Judge Mitchell read aloud in court. The letter said, "I forgive my mommy because I know she was sick, but I wish she had chosen to love us more than she loved the drugs. I wish she had tried to be our mommy instead of making me be the mommy for Tyler and Sophia." Judge Mitchell sentenced Jessica Williams to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 20 years. As the bailiff led Jessica away in handcuffs, she finally broke down and cried, but it was too late for tears to help anyone. 2 years after Jessica Williams was sentenced to prison, Emma Williams stood in front of the Michigan State Legislature holding a piece of paper with her own handwriting. On it, she was now 11 years old and much taller than she had been during the trial. Her blonde hair was clean and shiny, and she wore a pretty blue dress that her grandmother Margaret had bought for this special day. Emma was nervous about speaking to so many important adults, but she had something important to say. She had practiced her speech many times with her therapist, Dr. Nancy Roberts, who had been helping Emma deal with the trauma from her early childhood. "My name is Emma Williams," she said into the microphone. "When I was 8 years old, I had to take care of my little brother and baby sister because my parents were too sick from drugs to take care of us. I want to tell you about a new law that could help other children like me." The law Emma was talking about was called the Sophia Williams Protection Act, named after her baby sister who had survived the malnutrition and was now 3 years old and living happily with Margaret. The law was designed to fix some of the problems that had allowed Emma's family situation to get so bad before anyone could help them. The idea for the law came from Detective Maria Rodriguez, who had never stopped thinking about the Williams children. After Jessica's trial, Detective Rodriguez had been promoted to head a new task force focused on child protection. Her job was to study cases like the Williams family and figure out how to prevent similar tragedies. Detective Rodriguez had identified several problems with the way child abuse cases were handled in Michigan. First, there were not enough social workers to handle all the reports that came in. Amanda Thompson, who was still working for Child Protective Services, often had more than 30 active cases at one time. It was impossible for her to give each family the attention they needed. Second, the legal process moved too slowly. Even when social workers knew that children were in danger, it could take months to get permission from a judge to remove the children from their homes. In that time, a lot of damage could be done. Third, there was not enough communication between different agencies. Teachers, police officers, social workers, doctors, and judges all worked on child abuse cases, but they did not always share information with each other quickly enough. The Sophia Williams Protection Act was designed to fix these problems. The law would hire 500 new social workers across Michigan and give them smaller caseloads so they could spend more time with each family. It would also create a new computer system that would allow teachers, social workers, police, and doctors to share information about at-risk children immediately. Most importantly, the law would create special emergency courts that could make decisions about removing children from dangerous homes within 24 hours instead of weeks or months. The law had strong support from many people who had been involved in the Williams case. Dr. Patricia Martinez, who was now the head of child abuse prevention at Children's Hospital, testified that early intervention could have saved baby Sophia from months of malnutrition and permanent brain damage. If we had been able to remove the Williams children from their home after the first report of neglect, Sophia would be a normal, healthy 3-year-old today, Dr. Martinez told the legislators. Instead, she will need special education and therapy for the rest of her life because of the damage that was done to her brain during her first 18 months. Judge Harold Mitchell, who had handled Jessica Williams's case, also supported the new law. "I have seen too many cases where children suffered while we waited for the legal system to work," Judge Mitchell said. "Sometimes the law moves too slowly to protect the people who need protection the most. But the law also had opponents who worried about giving the government too much power to break up families. Some people argued that parents deserved more time to fix their problems before losing their children permanently." Michael Torres, who had been Jessica Williams' defense lawyer, spoke against the law. "We need to be careful about rushing to judgment," Torres said. Parents who are struggling with addiction or mental illness deserve a chance to get help and keep their families together. Emma's speech to the legislature was the turning point in the debate over the law. When she finished talking about her experiences and how the new law could help other children, there was not a dry eye in the room. "I know my mommy and daddy loved us," Emma said, "but they loved drugs more. If someone had helped us sooner, maybe Tyler and Sophia and I would not have had to go through so much pain. Maybe other children will not have to take care of babies when they should be playing and going to school." The Sophia Williams Protection Act was passed by the Michigan legislature 3 months later and signed into law by the governor. Emma, Tyler, and Sophia were invited to the signing ceremony, along with Margaret Williams and all the people who had worked to save them. Tyler was now 9 years old and doing much better than anyone had expected. He was in 3rd grade and making good friends at school. He still saw a therapist once a week, but he was learning to trust adults and to believe that he deserved to be taken care of instead of having to take care of others. Tyler had one remaining problem from his early childhood. He hoarded food. Even though he lived with his grandmother, who always made sure there was plenty to eat, Tyler still hid snacks in his bedroom and under his mattress. His therapist said this was normal for children who had experienced starvation, and that Tyler would probably outgrow it as he got older and felt more secure. Baby Sophia had made remarkable progress, but she would always be affected by the malnutrition she experienced as an infant. She was smaller than other 3-year-olds and had to work with a speech therapist to learn to talk properly. She also had some learning disabilities that would require special education throughout her school years. But Sophia was a happy, loving child who adored her big sister Emma and her brother Tyler. She did not remember the terrible conditions she had lived in as a baby, which Dr. Martinez said was probably a blessing.